Special broadcast from Kigali in Rwanda. It's an historic broadcast tonight. It's the first time ever that President Paul Kagame, the chairperson of the African Union and the president of Rwanda, has done a live interview to 48 countries across Africa, Pan-African that is. It'll also be running on terrestrial television here in Rwanda as well. If you want to keep up with us online, you can go hashtag Kagame on CNBC Africa. Keep up the conversation. We're going to be talking trade, we're going to be talking investment. We're going to be also, in the second half of the show, we're going to be taking questions from some of the billionaires and entrepreneurs of Africa. We'll be putting them straight here to President Paul Kagame. So thank you very much, Mr. President, for joining us in your capital city tonight. Now, philosophers and poets, they've been talking about this for decades, a united Africa. And it seems on the business front, it's on the cards, it's not far away. We're talking about an African free trade area. And as chairperson of the African Union, how are you going to make this happen?
Well, Africa coming together and being united is a very important task and responsibility for all of us. It's never going to be the task of the chairperson of the African Union alone. What the chairperson does is to galvanize the understanding and support and everyone to come together so that we do what needs to be done for our continent to be unified. So we have already started, and with the continental free trade area, before that we've been talking about integration, regional integration. Regions have come together, whether east, south, west, north, to see that countries in specific regions with a lot of commonalities can come together to do business, to invest in each other, or to deal with the rest of the world as one entity. And therefore we have done a bit of trying to bring now these regions together in this form of continental free trade area. This definitely supports.
Surely it's going to be a very difficult job. You're going to have to sweep away this patchwork across the continent of regulation, bureaucracy, and tariffs. How difficult is that going to be?
It's going to be difficult. Bringing change, even when it is very necessary, is a difficult thing to do. Even really when people are talking about what they need to do in order to improve their lives and standards of living, and they will still fall short of doing exactly what they even knew or talked about they should be doing. But as a leader, as a chairperson of the African Union, or even a president of my own country, I know it is a task of other leaders to not only talk about nice things that should happen, but also do the hard work to lead all of us to the good results of, therefore, the efforts we have to put in. So we have to keep raising our voices, first of all, reminding people or assuming that they have forgotten, because some of them don't do what they're supposed to do, not because they have forgotten, but just because they are not doing what they know they should be doing. So you have to keep raising your voice, you have to keep reminding people, and we do it collectively. It's always going to be useful if we do it together and understand that together is when we are going to succeed.
Well, speaking of raising your voice, a lot of countries have not yet signed up to this African free trade area. What can you do about this? I mean, can you use the carrot or the stick?
The best way is to start from somewhere and demonstrate the good that can come out of such a thing as a free trade area, and having an agreement over that and what is to happen. once you demonstrate the benefits, I think people will quickly move towards doing things that benefit them. And in actual fact, we also need to look at what happens elsewhere in the world. We know the stories of different parts of the world where people have come from and the path they have taken and where they are today. And from Africa, we look at what has happened in Asia, the long history of Europe, other, Latin America, United States, Canada, Americas, and so on. So we need to relate where they are with a number of things that have happened or they have done to be there that we so much talk about and say we want to be there as well. But you can't be there by just admiring what other people have done and not doing exactly what you need to do for yourself and get moving the situation and improving it and therefore getting the results you want to get. The results meaning the tangible things that actually benefit the people of any country, of this continent, for that matter, in real terms. And people will say it, they will show it. People won't have to be running out of their countries and drowning in the Mediterranean Sea or facing other life-threatening situations if they really, something that we want to happen in our own countries was happening.
But that's one thing. I mean, there's one image that's been around Africa for a few years now. People crossing the Mediterranean Sea in rickety boats, losing their lives, some of them. How do you think the leaders of Africa are failing these poor people?
Leaders of Africa, we have a not so enviable task of being realistic and doing the things that we can do that can prevent some of these occurrences happening. Now, so leaders of Africa don't have to feel angry, sad, or some kind of despair seeing hundreds or thousands of young people, men and women, drowning in the sea and dying across the desert before they reach the sea. We also need to say, what is it that we can do to prevent this? And what we can do is here at home. Well, people have all kinds of arguments. Some of them may have merit of saying that, okay, it's okay for people to be going there. Those people need to welcome them. After all, those people in the north owe us this or that. They are the ones who historically have been part of this problem we are facing today, so many decades ago, and so on and so forth. Whatever the merits are to some of these arguments, if there are, there is a task we have to carry out, and that is present, that's with us, that's real, and that is our own situation is not retaining these people to stay in our countries. Therefore, what can we do to actually make sure that our situation in our countries improves and we are able to retain our young people, the talent, whether potential or real, and overcome this challenge.
What do you think leaders should be doing to keep people here in this continent, talented young people?
It's governance. We need to govern our people, our spaces properly. But governance alone does not provide anything. It's what you do within those structures, and that comes to investments that we make that are, responsive to people's needs and aspirations and desires. It's business. It's allowing the creation of a business environment where small, big businesses can make money, can do whatever they can to, and free to do that, because people know how to do some of these things. But until there is a conducive environment for them to play that part, that won't happen. So leaders must make sure that this is the case. And of course allow people to participate in all that. And once there is participation, there is benefiting, there is the feeling that what they have is what they wanted, or at least they have hope, they are sure that things are moving in the right direction. Even if they don't have what they wanted now, they can have it tomorrow. There is definitely going to be preventing of that sort of situation.
From an economic point of view, what do you think are some of the big issues in African economics now? One of them, which you can't escape in any country, especially South Africa at the moment, is land. This obsession with people getting land back from the past. Do you really think that this should be one of the main issues on this continent?
Yes, but it depends which country you're talking about. Some countries, land is not a problem. In fact, it is just a wasted opportunity. Some countries have more land than they currently need, or that they are not putting to good use, even if it is not enough. Imagine a small Rwanda. Geographically, we still have land we can put to productivity and be able to produce whatever we need, at least to fill a certain gaps that exist. So it's land. It's about people. Do you create an environment where people can be productive, either on land, or they need capital. You need to have access to that. They need to have skills. They need so that we put together all these factors that will enable them to be productive. This is what Africa needs. But mainly in fact, the kind of Africa we're talking about that we see today is that there are so many opportunities around us that maybe politics or governance, as I said, or other structural problems have not allowed our people to seize, on that and actually go ahead and do what. But it's not just politics or leadership or something. It's also, but anyway, they are related. I think there has to be changing of mindset across the board, whether it is our citizens or our leaders.
How do you do that?
Again, it's just doing the very things I talked about that need to be done, that we know we should actually be doing. If you create stability in the country, if there is security for people, if there is stability, if there are, business environment, people can, know what to expect, and it allows, the situation allows investors to put their money in your country and get, benefit from that, and those where they have invested also benefit between the investors and the countries and the people of countries where investments have taken place. We should have that relationship that creates the overall environment that is stable, in my view.
Just one more question before we move on about free trade. Some of the smaller countries in the continent have said that they fear that a free trade area across the entire continent could see them suffering by being flooded by cheap imports from other parts of the continent.
Well, I would start by asking them, what is it that is happening now to them now? I mean, everybody is already in a bad situation. So I don't think it can actually get worse. It can't get worse by...
But they complain it could kill some industries in some of these small countries that are just hanging on now.
Depending on how... because you see, free trade area means you put in place certain rules by which all of us are going to play. It's not just free trade area and then everybody does whatever they want. There is free trade area establishes common interest. In fact, there are different stages of that process that will benefit people. A free trade area allows free movement of people and goods and services and capital and all kinds of things. This is what it's supposed to be. Now, that is also supposed to be accompanied by a customs union. So by customs union, you are establishing some order as to what taxes and what level, and harmonizing that so that you are trying to make sure that it doesn't give advantage to one and not the other, as we have seen. But it's not just the name. It's not a free trade area. It's not a customs union. And then everyone again does what they want. It's making sure that you also put mechanisms in place, you put institutions and structures in place so that they ensure that everyone is playing by the rules established. The bigger countries will benefit more as they are benefiting more, but the smaller countries will benefit even more than they are actually.
How long do you think it could be things get worse before they get better for the economies of Africa if this free trade went ahead next year?
You see, I don't see it getting worse. I see it starting from where we are and things getting better. Yes, but there is a lot of work to be done. Leaders of our continent at different levels, different institutions have to play our part. Again, as I said, the laws that are in place that govern different things and harmonization of that across borders will have to take place. You can't be doing the right thing in one country and across in another. They are not respecting the agreement you put in place and then expect things to go better. But there is already some kind of constraint or chaos of some level, if you will. So signing or ratifying the free trade agreement is a step forward. You are trying to rein in some of these unpredictable things to make sure that they are predictable.
To your role as the chairperson of the African Union, I mean, if you can argue that this is Africa's time for the economies of this continent, but still there's that lingering fear and concern sometimes about stability. I mean, even in your own region here in East Africa. How are you planning to sort of tackle this in your job?
It's just to keep bringing out these discrepancies or complaints people have are real. You need to listen to them and you need to get to the bottom of why there are these contradictions. Of course, the major problem being we have many of us who say the right thing, but the next day we are doing completely the opposite. So until we exercise some conscientious discipline to an extent, that really, if we understand that this is what we need to do, and it's good for everybody, it's good for you, it's good for me, and in fact, if there is something that is good for both of us, we shouldn't tamper with that. We need to only take it forward and make sure we benefit more, but together. So we still have that, and this is something we have seen over many years. Because even when we are talking about regional integration, which makes good progress or has made good progress over the years, we still have people who will talk about integration and talk about all the good things about it and how everybody should, do this and that. And then you find the same people are the ones undermining integration. Mm-hmm. It has happened. We see it every day. So, but we need to keep shouting out these people and saying, please, that this is affecting me, and maybe in the end it will affect you, and then so.
All of these dreams cost money, and some countries are not too keen to pay the 0.2% levy towards the African Union. Not everyone's keen to pay. What are you going to do about that?
Well, again, for me, the analysis is simple. I have to understand where I'm starting from. Is it a good place? And is anything being introduced supposed to improve the situation, complicate it even more, make it worse, or what? So 0.2% that was introduced as a levy for countries so that we pay for our dues for the African Union was well thought out, but it doesn't answer every aspect of the problem. It answers most of the aspects of the problem. And the whole aim behind that is for the Africans, for African countries, to be able to pay for themselves, for our activities of the African Union. We can't, on one hand, everybody wants to be, say Africa must be independent, every country should be independent, we should have one voice, one big voice, because when we bring our voices together, then we have a big voice, we can negotiate with these regions across the world and, have a fair share of what we need to have. So it was a formula that was meant to provide us with a sense of stability and predictability as to the finances of the African Union. Because before that, well, some people have been assessed their economies, different challenges, and we say, pay this much. And people don't just pay.
What can you do?
Therefore,
what can you do about it?
There are many things we can try to do. Some of them may not be good things, but we shouldn't be afraid of doing that. But
like what?
First, finish the first point was, so the 0.2% is not a do or die kind of thing. It's a formula to help us. If people have difficulties with that, then our people, we have people in place, institutions in place, to help have a discussion with the countries who have a problem with 0.2% of eligible imports to find another way, but keeping this as a working formula that guides everybody. Then we can have flexibility around that, but ensure that there's this. Now, but for people who don't pay, then we should also come to a certain point where we say, if you don't pay, then how do you have a voice amongst us? You need to pay. And certainly bigger countries or bigger economies are going to find themselves paying, comparatively higher than, but I think it is a fair thing. The formula ensures some fair process. You can combine the usual assessment that has been made with this formula of 0.2%. And by the way, if we don't work on this and finalize, we have had other formulas before. There was the Obasanjo process where the former president of Nigeria was asked to, and with the team to work out a formula through which, or by which we should be paying for, our activities and stable, predictable, and this thing has been collecting dust somewhere on the shelf. It was forgotten about for years. Then they came up with this one. So we don't want to have every effort that we have put in place to end up on the shelf and dying a natural death and nothing being done about it. So we can actually come up and say, anyway, we have to find a formula we agree on, or if we don't agree on it, we can find some flexibility around it, but we need to pay for our activities of the African Union, and if you don't pay, then you don't come to a meeting and start shouting and making all kinds of noise and making demands and asking for all kinds of things when you have not paid.
Just lastly, very briefly, I mean, could you ever go as far as expelling a country from the African Union if they don't pay?
Maybe we should come to that point. We should, because you have seen how in certain countries where they have had security challenges or instability to some level, the African Union has been known now for some time to actually face up to this challenge and tell this country, no, leaders of this country who are behind this, we don't know, this country has been suspended from the African Union until these matters are sorted out. It has happened. We know the examples. So we can apply similar efforts to actually even deal with some of these other things that are taking us backwards.
Well, we'll hold that thought there. We're continuing with this special live interview across Africa with President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, the chairperson of the African Union. Do stay with us after the break. We're going to be talking investment, China, and also getting some questions for him from some billionaires across the continent. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the CNBC Africa special, broadcasting live across 48 countries in Africa. From here, Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, I'm speaking to President Paul Kagame, the chairperson of the African Union, and also the head of state here in Rwanda. We've been talking trade, and now we're going to talk investment. How do you think Africa's doing right now in persuading the hard-headed businessmen of this world to put their money into this continent?
Well, let me start with my own country, Rwanda. If you look at ease of doing business index, which covers the whole world, but just on the continent of Africa alone, Rwanda is the second best place when it comes to ease of doing business index. But I'm starting with this, I'm saying with this, every country on our continent is trying to fix different problems that create obstacles for doing business in Africa. Every country is making an effort. Rwanda is one of them. The whole East Africa is involved in that. So on people's minds, they know how important it is for countries to create a good environment, for investors to invest, for people doing business to do business, or for these citizens and business people of one country to do business in another country or with other citizens of the other countries. This is now very common discussion, and people are always searching for better ways to allow that to happen. So I think things are on the upward trend. Things are moving in the right direction, but it's never enough. And I think Africa is still lagging behind many, other parts of the world. Even if you look at the intra-African trade, is still very low, 16% when it comes to other regions. It's much higher than that, 3-4 times that. So we need to improve, we need to do better, and we need to move faster even.
And I've asked this of a number of African leaders in my time, and is there ever a tipping point, you think, where foreign investment comes in, good, creates jobs, stimulates the economy, but on the other hand, do you think there's a tipping point where maybe the people of Africa are losing control of their country because it's been taken over by foreign investors and foreign corporations?
Well, I want to suppose that what you are talking about, coming to the tipping point, means maybe you've been doing things the proper way and you are in the process or on the path to that tipping point. So you just don't arrive at a tipping point, or if you arrived at it and it becomes problematic, it's because you haven't been following a correct path, or you haven't been measuring what is happening along the way. But I don't think we have come to that point yet, because there hasn't been enough of foreign investments in our countries. We are still begging for more. We also need local investors. We need to create that environment that allows local investors to invest, or local if it is just one country, but I can also say local as to the continent. If, for example, we have the East African region, local can be what we have created in the East African region to allow people to cross borders and do different things. So we haven't reached that point where we've been overwhelmed by foreign investors to reach that tipping point, because we haven't exhausted our potential.
Could come one day, though.
Yes, it could come one day. So, but let it come one day, which is a problem we would need to resolve, when we're already having a good start and a good process going on, as to allowing our citizens to invest and also the foreigners to invest. But the best way to address that is even to allow partnership between private and public. Private partnerships are a very good way to, well, some people have problems with that, but our own experience here in Rwanda, in fact, we've been able to address a number of investment problems through that. We have had to put laws in place to ensure that there is stability, that everyone likes the foreigners who come to invest, and partnership, or local ones in partnership with the government. These have moved quite well, and we have realized certain investments we would not have realized if we made the investments alone as government, or if we had to wait for private people to come and make these investments. So coming together has solved that.
But a lot of countries have run into a lot of soured private-public investments. How do you approach it as a leader? What's your main principle when you're trying to negotiate a public-private partnership?
You see, the starting point is, does everyone, let's say both sides, the public, are we prepared? Do we know what we want? Do we know how to get it? While we allow an opportunity, the other one you want to partner with, to also get what they want. So it's two parties here. Why things have gone wrong, some people have gone into a partnership, and this is mostly with the governments. A lot of things happen that prove that either government did not know what they wanted, or they knew, but the people who were involved on behalf of government ended up trying to benefit themselves instead of government, instead of the country, instead of looking at the country's interests. And therefore, they ended up benefiting themselves and the other partner who is the private. This has always been the case. But if governments are prepared, and the governments have expertise, if they don't have it in-house, they can hire expertise to act on their behalf. There is so much out there that once you ask people to stand in for you with expertise, they will do that ably. So it's not the formula of public-private partnership that is problematic. It's those who are involved in the transactions that become problematic. Yes. So
you're talking about corruption here.
Absolutely, corruption comes in. There's no question about it. Corruption is part of it, or just bad governance of the whole process.
I mean, the cynics say that all human beings are corruptible. I know it's something that you have tried to fight in this country for a decade.
Yes.
How close do you think you are to actually getting it out of the system here?
You will never kill corruption completely, but you can reduce it to the bare minimum. And what has to happen is to create an environment of rule of law and accountability and transparency in which these things will be done. And without fear or favor, exercise justice. That one is key. It doesn't matter whether he's a big person or ordinary small person. Once they are caught up in this, the law should apply. Yes.
And another final question as well. China, from a lot of the corners of the continent, and I speak to a lot of people are still saying, well, it smacks of neocolonialism, the influence that they're exerting in Africa right now. What do you say?
Well, tell me about neocolonialism or the old one. The new or the old, I don't know. They are all bad things. But again, it comes to the whole point. There is, China makes investments, say, in Africa. You don't make investments for nothing. It's not charity, right? Africa needs investments. Again, it goes back to the other point I raised. Does Africa know what it wants in working with other people, other parts of the world? If China offers an opportunity, that's the way I prefer to see it. What does Rwanda want from China? Or what can we obligate from China where we will benefit and China will benefit? Because again, it's not a charity relationship. So if we know that and have a discussion about it, then we should have a fair deal. Do I want the Chinese to build a power plant for me, for Rwandans, to have sufficient electricity? How much is China able to lend to us? Or how much actually do we owe different groups that have been lending us money? So we have to. So we make sure that we don't end up borrowing too much or more than we can actually absorb from China. And if you did it with any other country anyway, it would be the same problem. So we have to be conscious of that. But if they are able to give us resources or money or lend us and say, we'll build for you a power plant because that's what we want. And we say, okay, we are going to have this much, we invested in it, and this is how we are going to repay the debt and so on and so forth. Why should that be a problem?
Sure,
yes. Because I don't know of any place where China has walked into a country and started grabbing things Well, if it happened, then it's not the problem of China, it's the problem of what is happening. I think for the country to just surrender and everything is grabbed, then there's a problem.
So now we have some questions for you from across the continent that people sent to us. Starting with Tonya Cole, he's a millionaire from Lagos in Nigeria. Now he's saying, in essence, that Rwanda's got a very good reputation for getting foreign investment. What do you think other countries can take from this, in brief?
It's just what we have said. It's being straight to the point and being accountable and being clear and, acting in the interest, in your own interest, in the interest of your country, in the interest of your people. This is just what we have done. We said we want to transact, to do business with everybody. We don't discriminate, whether China, America, Russia, Europe, or Africans, fair Africans. We start with the fair Africans. In fact, we've been, that's why we removed visas for Africans and they travel here. We start with our neighbors, with our brothers and sisters. So, for Tony, I know him very well. He's, a clear-headed person as well, a business person with a heart for Africa and so on. So what is clear, I don't think we should even be looking at it like Rwanda or Kagame has, lessons for this, and we don't have lessons for anyone. But we have practices, by the way, some of which we've learned from others, different parts of the world, that have served us well. We have invested with a clear mind, with a clear sense of what we want, where we want to go, and also a sense that as we do business with others, we should be fair to each other. And we demand that fairness is exercised with us as well. So this is the whole thing. So once you insist that, if this is going to be the example by which anybody is going to say, oh, no, but I'm going to do it like this, it's not doing it like that because it is being done by Rwanda. It's doing like that because it's maybe the fair way to do it. Yes.
A question now from home, a gentleman by the name of Eugene Ia Murimei. What is the African Union doing to promote the free movements of Africans across the continent?
Again, for us, we cannot dictate to anyone what they do in their own countries. But for us, we do things depending on what we think is right for us and maybe for others, and also for others. For example, before we start making noise and in discussions, reminding people, saying, we should have free movement of people, that will involve making it easy for visas and work permits and all kinds of things. We thought the best way to do it is to be seen to be doing it ourselves. So we started here. In fact, before we started in a discussion about it, we said, no, look, we should allow Africans to come here, to come through here easily. So people get a visa on arrival at our airports. So this was a demonstration as an example. And it has benefited us because we see more visitors come to Rwanda. We see more investors combined with the ease of doing business, which I said earlier, and when we make people free to move here, it has served us well. But we think other people can be served well by that too if they practiced it. Now, I can't account for what other countries are doing or not doing relative to that. But I can account for what I am doing, and I can demonstrate to whoever wants to listen that in actual fact we've done this. The dangers you thought that were involved have not been there. We have only been benefiting. So why wouldn't we do it so that we benefit all of us? And the more countries practice that, the more benefit that goes across the continent. Therefore, to the person who raised the question, I would say we've raised our voice about it.
Mm-hmm.
Even as the chairman of the African Union, I have spoken about it. I have been...
and another one from Nigeria, another millionaire, Kola Karim, chairman of Shoreline Natural Resources. It's one I like. It's, if President Kagame had the opportunity to rule Rwanda all over again, what would be the top 3 things that he would do differently?
Well, I guess, of course, this means a Rwanda that has also changed. If it was all over again, maybe things will have changed.
What would you
But
like?
what I have always insisted on, 1, do everything possible. It's not going to be different. Maybe it is the same things and trying to do it better. You see, it's not necessarily going to be a different thing. For example, if I was saying, whether it is now or it is all over again, I would insist on saying, let's invest in our people. Invest in our people. Make sure that our people have skills, they have, therefore, possibility for employment. Let's our people, let's have our people have good health. We need to invest in their health, in their education, and
the
skills,
third
and
thing?
so on. Well, the third thing is, you see, it's important to be organized. Organization helps in terms of utilization of resources, in terms of prioritizing. So organization as part of governance is very important. And within that, you make sure that everybody participates, contributes, and therefore in the end benefits.
Now I've got one from the youngest billionaire on the continent, a man by the name of Mohamed Dewji, based in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. Now he's talking about trade, as you know, the member of the East Africa community. He says, lately I've seen countries in East Africa becoming more protectionist. For instance, Uganda has 100 new products with protectionist tariffs. Are we moving forward to new trade or backwards to protectionism? That's his question.
Protectionism is not going to be correct. It may not serve people well, even those who practice it. Because the moment you practice it, you're inviting others to do the same. So, and again, when we are talking about integration, we have to be careful. Integration is a give and take process. But protectionism implies just taking and not giving. So it's not going to be a good thing. It certainly takes us back a little bit from where we want to be or where we have been or where we are. And it is started by one party, one entity, and then the other one says, well, if the other one is doing that, why not me? Then the other one says, why not me? So I think this is a matter that we need to discuss and take a view on seriously, and so that we make sure we are making a good progress and there is no deterioration. We need to be protectionist. Why? Why would we be? Well, but that has now, it's a kind of trend across the world. There is so much talk about protectionism. It seems the world is shifting. The world that was opening up and, things happening across the globe more or less freely and with, beneficial fluidity. Things are now beginning to say, no, people are beginning to concentrate on themselves. This is not a healthy thing. It's not healthy globally. It's not healthy when it comes to even regional entities or smaller entities like East Africa, because at the end of the day, for Africa, for example, and East Africa, by the way, there are some countries that think they are big on our continent. But honestly, they are only big when you are together.
Mhm.
Alone, they immediately discover they are not big enough. They end up being small.
Any countries in particular you're thinking of?
No, I'm just saying generally, as a principle, I think
Yeah.
valuing coming together, unity, and working together, and benefiting each other, and creating one voice as we have wanted, as we have always said and wanted for Africa. It's so that Africa, we are talking about 1.3 billion people. If you are talking about 50 million people, well, it depends on what you are comparing that with. It can be small or big. But in the end, if we are talking about real issues that we have to address and looking at the global aspects of it, 50 million is small. 1.3 billion
Sure.
is much bigger. And if you are playing in that as a partner, as part of it, 50 million is no longer 50 million. It has actually gone much higher than that. So,
one last question from outside, and then I've got one or two more questions for you. Olusola Tiniola, the president of the Association of Telecoms Corporations of Nigeria. Now, he's saying, what has your presidency and leadership assisted in defining Rwanda's digital transformation, which has been quite big?
Now, again, if we are conscious of the global trend, and if we are looking at the benefits, and we also understand we are now really in the information age, it's no longer, as many people have said before, it's no longer the wealth of oil, but data. So you start early in making the kinds of investments that puts you in a good place for that. We started our digital policy and investments way back. We saw this coming in time, and we are realistic about it. And by the way, we also understood that investments in digital economy investments do not conflict with other investments. No, instead, there is a complementarity that comes along. There is enhancement of other sectors of the economy if you get this right. So that's how we come up with this. And we have discovered over time we were not mistaken. And I think it's the same thing with other countries. We see other countries on our continent doing that, or having done that, or beginning to do that. And I think they are discovering that it more or less accelerates the growth they want and development, and does not undermine it or conflict with that. So this is how, this is again to do with the choices Rwanda has made that have served us well, and in actual fact, given, as I said, the size of Rwanda, therefore the size of the economy, and then you add the tragic history we have gone through, if there was anything wrong with our choices, we wouldn't be where we are now, or possibly we would not even be there at all.
One last question for you, bearing in mind where you are now. What do you think you would have been if you hadn't gone into politics and become a president? What would you want to do with your life?
Well, during when time I was young, in my youthful age, I used to like, at least in my mind, to do things, to make things. Maybe I would have pursued certain careers and professions that would have seen me as one of these people around, an engineer or somebody, doing some innovation to create things. I have always...
So you'd be quite happy as a carpenter or something?
Absolutely, a mechanic or...
Really?
This, yeah, absolutely.
And if you were, what would you be saying to your president of Rwanda today?
I would be saying to my president that presidents manage countries, people, and politics, and so on, and economies, and so on. I would say try to do the best or to provide us with an environment that does not stand in the way of people's ability to realize themselves, their potential, or do whatever they want to do. So meaning government, get government out of the way of people trying to thrive and do things that they wish to do them. And this goes back to the same story. It's like always we're trying to say, what is it that we can get out of the way of business or investments or people who have gone, who have benefited from education to, based on the knowledge and the skills they have to do what they want to do that will improve their standards and so. This would be my request to my president. If that was the situation, I would say, make sure government doesn't stand in the way of freedoms of people to realize their potential and do what they wish to do.
Thank you very much, President Paul Kagame, the President of Rwanda. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for on this CNBC Africa special, live here from Kigali in Rwanda, across 48 countries in Africa. From me, Chris Bishop, the head of programming at CNBC Africa, it's goodbye.